down and flush them out. We don't play up with these cutters, bet my youngest chop them down.
Welcome to the Reframing the Image of Relationships podcast, where we dive into the heart of what makes relationships thrive. In a world filled with complexities and challenges, this podcast stands as a beacon of hope and wisdom, guiding you through the art of nurturing meaningful connections. Our discussions are more than mere conversations. They are a roadmap to healthier, more fulfilling relationships. Whether you're seeking to deepen your understanding of love, improve communication with your loved ones, or find guidance in times of relational turmoil, this podcast offers a fresh, faith-centered approach to facing these challenges together. As we unpack the mysteries of human interactions, we invite you to open your hearts and minds to the transformative power of love and empathy. Get ready to be inspired, enlightened, and equipped to see relationships in a new light. And now, to guide you through this journey of discovery, please welcome your host, a visionary leader and a true catalyst for change, Dwyane Dwyer, but we affectionately know him as the Mindset Coach.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this month's episode of Reframing the Image of Relationship. We are your hosts for this morning's conversation. My name is Dwyane Dwyer, I go by the Mindset Coach, and I'm also joined by Lisa Keys, the voice of reason. And below us, we have Miss Sandra McLean, also known as I Am Queenie Love from the Relationship Zone. How is everybody doing this beautiful Saturday morning?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Lisa?
I am fabulous. The sun is shining. Beautiful.
Girl, you look like you was on the beach someplace enjoying life. Look at you. Listen, as always, it's just a pleasure and an honor to be able to share a conversation with you guys. And as always, it is a pleasure and honor to share a conversation with those of you who join us in the space of all of the social media. So we want to welcome you, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on Facebook, Instagram, X, or even LinkedIn. So again, this is one of the places that we like to call you by name. So good morning and welcome to the show, Michelle Ray, Crystal Everett, Nick D, good to see you. N. Ellis, good to see you. As also Miss Adrian Walthour, good to see you. Don't want to leave anybody else. I think I got them all. Hey, there go my brother, Chris. Good to see you, man, from across the table with Chris McClellan. And for those of you who have not gotten in the chat and just given us a warm greeting of hello, good morning, whatever that looks like, by all means do so. If this is your first time joining us, and if you're on YouTube, look in the lower right hand corner of your screen and locate the YouTube icon, put your cursor over top of it and then click on it and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to hit the notification bell. Don't just click the whole notification bell, hit the drop down arrow and select all. That way you'll know every time we go live on this particular channel. Now, speaking of this particular channel, again, this is empowering perspectives. And so what we believe here is that everybody is a subject matter expert of their own point of view, their own perspective. So that being said, everybody's thoughts are welcome. Everybody's, point of view is welcome. So please share it, especially in the chat. We're looking forward to integrating your conversation into our conversation. Speaking of conversation, that kind of gets us back after the conversation we had last month, which is all about submission. Now, Queenie, you missed it. I'm sorry. I know we've missed you, right? So we're going to welcome you back.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of bring everybody up to speed, to include our sister here, when we talked about the art of submission, we talked about three different things last time. We talked about defining the discipline of submission. We talked about submission and conflict resolution, and we also talked the power of yielding in relationships. So that being said, let's go ahead. I just want to kind of put that out there first, and we're going to go ahead and get this conversation started and just kind of dive right into it. For those of you who are seeking the connection of outstanding relationships or are currently existing in a relationship, have you ever pondered the essence of true, meaningful, and enriching partnership? What if I told you that within the delicate balance of submission lies an unparalleled strength that fortifies bonds and nurtures love? In the second installment of our exploration of the art of submission, we dive even deeper into the transformative power of surrendering self for the greater good of relationship. Stay tuned as we unravel the secrets of unlocking the unparalleled value and beauty found within the art of relationships. Now, I want to kind of get the party started, and I'm gonna go off the rails for a second here, because I think everybody on this panel is at least over the age of 30. Just gonna go that far. That's my guess, right? So in your opinions, what do you believe? Like, what's the problem when it comes down to submission? Like, thank you, based upon what you've seen, you've experienced, what you've heard, so forth and so on. What is the concern, the issue, the rub when it comes down to submission?
Um, Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm so glad to be back, Dwayne. And of course, Lisa, so glad to see you. So I think because you preface this with our age, right? We're all over 30. I'm almost 50, so there's that. I think for many of us, when it comes to submission, is feeling safe. Um, we have been obviously caring for ourselves for X amount of years, whether we've been married or doing this singularly. But at our age or this phase in our life, we raise children. Many of us have raised children. We have our careers. Maybe we've even relaunched careers, stepped into a new career. Chapters have changed. And so when you get into a relationship with someone, if you don't feel safe, it's very difficult to submit to that person. If Because I think that in dating, you need to be able to observe and analyze a person that you are, that's a prospect. And I believe most of us are looking to see if it's even safe to be in any type of connection with them. And how can you submit to a person that one is a stranger, or two, you don't feel safe, excuse me, being connected to? And then lastly, safety comes in so many different forms. If you if you find that this person has somehow made some really poor and bad decisions in their life, it's even more difficult to submit yourself, because now they're going to be a chief influence on you, but they haven't necessarily done their life well, right? So I think when we talk about submission at this age, some of the things we are looking for, I know for me personally, I'm looking for safety. Is it safe for me to be able to, is it safe for me to submit? Can I even become comfortable enough to submit? Because I have a life as well. And there's certain things you can just yield over. That's not what I'm talking about. But I mean the bigger picture of a foundational relationship. Am I safe in this space? And is it safe for me to commit and submit, shall I say?
I like that. I like that. The idea of safety. And I love the way that you kind of make it make sense, right, for the masses, because I do agree, that that is one of the concerns when it comes down to submission. So thank you for sharing that. Lisa, what are your thoughts on the concern when it comes down to submission?
Well, I think the I'm trying to make sure that I say this correctly. But overall, I think it's because people don't understand what submission means. Some people may think that it means that you need to submit to me because I'm the man, or some some women I may perceive it as I'm giving up something, and I may not be able to trust you with this, and that causes me to have some fear. Now, when you understand what submission means, then those fears or those concerns, they're not valid anymore. They're not something that you concern yourself.
I like that as well, and I definitely do understand that from both sides. From the ruling over your home with iron fists, I'm the man, you must submit to me, or the other side of it that I feel like I need to give up a piece of myself in order to to submit. I'm losing myself. I'm losing my identity. I believe that is a concern as well. I'm in definite agreement with every version of your perspectives. I am going to reserve whatever opinions I have because I was never instructed to submit in the space of personal relationships. So that's not my plight. I really wanted to get your guys' perspective because, again, it's better to hear that coming from you as opposed to coming from me, because coming from me, it sounds more like a critique, regardless of how nice I say it. And so for me, I want to make sure that I am on the right side of right in the space of that conversation. And I think that's a great segue as we dive into it. There was a question I believe Michelle has in there, and it's directed at Queenie. She said, "So what I hear what you're saying at Queenie is that we need to create or look for safe spaces."
I personally, I think in relationships, again, and this is, if this was my 20-year-old daughter that I was talking to, I would I would share something a little bit different to her. Yeah, I would totally share something different to her and her partner, because they're much younger, they're exploring, they're just kind of figuring it out. They're figuring out what love looks like for them. So I don't want to impose my own experiences on them. So for them, I would share something different, right? But for me at my age, absolutely. I have too much. So let me say it this way. I've come too far to submit to the wrong influence. And I say that not because I can't submit, can't be vulnerable. Absolutely. Why not? But I think even in vulnerability, we want to be safe. And after you've touched the stove and been burnt by it, you use caution. And I think that at our age, we have to be wise in what we're doing. So, yes, for me personally, I want to create a safe space, and I want to be in a safe place, right? For me to be able, with the person, I'm looking at all the things that they are, so I can see if this is someone that I can fully just submit all of the things to, right? But I can be submissive in certain areas in a relationship, but I think it's still you need to be safe in that.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And Michelle, I
Mhm.
hope she answered your question. So yeah, let's kind of get after this conversation because I think that's a great segue as we start talking about the challenge of submission and love. So the first question that I pose to you is that how can individuals overcome the fear of vulnerability? Because for me, I really do believe that that's really the gateway when it comes down to great relationships, learning how to become vulnerable, not just for women, but also for men. So, how can individuals overcome the fear of vulnerability that often accompanies the act of submission in romantic relationships?
In romantic relationships. So before we get to the romantic relationship, there's a process that we need to have completed first, and I think that is the the beginning. We have to get to know these individuals. We have to identify, and we can walk and take a journey with them together in our life. And then when we get to the point where we can have the romantic relationship, there has to be mutual respect. And I think that should have been discovered in the process of getting to know each other. So there has to be mutual respect for each other. And we have to be okay with serving each other. Serving each other is the most beautiful thing that we can do in a relationship. Because in a relationship, and I'm thinking of relationship as a couple that is married. That's my viewpoint for now. And I know that when Christ said, I came to serve, you know, he came to serve and to humble yourself. And humbling yourself in any relationship that you're in because you feel safe is one of the things that people desire. A lot may not have experienced it, but it is something that you desire. You want to submit. You want to make sure that you're with someone that you can, feel that you can have mutual respect for, and that you guys can grow together, because you're going to continue to grow in this relationship and continue to understand what being in a relationship that requires submission looks like for you. That's a discussion that you guys have to have. So I'll stop right there.
Listen, I had to pull out my pen and paper because Lisa started to give us a process, a book. So I want to make sure I'm in line before we move on, Queenie. Can I do that real quick? So I heard 2 key points. If I miss one, Lisa, by all means, let me know. I've heard mutual respect and learning how to serve each other. Am I on point, or did I miss anything?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good to go. All right, Queenie, you have it.
I couldn't agree with Lisa more. That's the point of finding the safety in it, right? So that you can be vulnerable enough and openly and willing to submit. The agreement is so important. Having this conversation is so important. How can you walk together except you agree, right? So if you are in a relationship and you come in, and Lisa said something earlier, sometimes people come in demanding or commanding you to submit because I am who I am, and and I'm supposed to have authority over you. No, that's not how this should work in a romantic relationship. That may work that way in corporate America, but it shouldn't work like that in a relationship. There must be some sort of communication. We have seen when people come into relationships dominating, someone feels abused, someone feels less than, someone feels devalued. And if we want to, I believe we want to have healthier relationships, we have to keep in mind how we are approaching, our position in the relationship and what that causes another person to feel. So being able to overcome that fear starts with just showing me who you are, right? And I show you who I am, and having these uncomfortable conversations, these intentional conversations. If that's what we want in the relationship, then I don't think either side should be opposed to talking it through. And I'll say this because it just came to me when I read this question. One of the things that Michelle Obama said was, keep your aperture open. Always lean in and be open to finding love and finding those healthy relationships. But when someone shows you who they are and it does not align with you, allow them to leave as quick as they came. So I think that sometimes we continue to drag these things out, right? We're not safe. We don't feel like we can be vulnerable. We don't feel like we're connecting. We don't feel like we can even see a future with this person. Well, do you think you'll be with them in 5 years? No. Do you want to, do you want to do this with them? No. But we're still in connection with them, like it's going to change. If you choose not to be vulnerable, if you do not feel respected, if you do not feel loved, if you don't feel that someone wants to submit to the relationship and to who you are in that relationship, or you don't feel that you want to be submissive in this relationship, then why are we doing this anyway? What is it for? And I think that when we address these, these are nuances that I believe we all should address to figure out where we are in the relationship and where we want the relationship to go. And if I want to be vulnerable, I want to be safe, and I want to be loved, then I need to be able to express that and then lean into trying it. And if it doesn't work, after I lean in, then I need to sit back up.
I'm loving it. Now, if I could package everything you said, and you correct me if I'm wrong, what I just heard you said is that I need to understand what authority looks like. And that looks for both sides. Like, men have to understand authority, have to understand where authority comes from. First of all, and that's how I say it. Understand where authority comes from, and then women also need to understand authority as well. And I like the fact you brought in the notion of the corporate setting, because that fits as well. I don't think it's totally absolved of it. I think what we've seen in the past is just bad leaders, and leaders who don't know how to be leaders. Like, sure, there is a responsibility of an employee. This is my job position. This is your job position. You are the leader. But by that same token, you just don't come in the office and pound the desk and say, I told you, blah, 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 blah. So the same thing from the corporate setting also exists in the personal space of relationship as well. There is a way to do things. And I think that's kind of like what we're getting at. There is definitely a way of doing things that recognizes that I'm dealing with another human being. And more importantly, I don't own that human being. I am only, depending upon the position, men, I am only, my responsibility is to grab her by the hand and usher her to Christ. That's my sole purpose in the relationship. If I'm viewing it as anything else, then I'm doing it wrong. Women, my responsibility is to recognize that he is the guide as we maneuver the space, and by his lead, we're going to Christ. That's how I view it. Now, in conjunction, and I love we started off with the process because you guys know I'm a process oriented person. Um, I love the notion of mutual respect first. I really do believe that if you don't have it within you to respect another person, right? If you don't have it within you to respect another person, then that means that there's some work that you need to do on you. I think that would be point zero before we get to one, two, three, and four. Do the necessary work on yourself that makes you more relationship savvy, if you will. Like if you don't have good relationships with people, 9 times out of 10, you won't have good relationships with another person. Now, I know somebody just heard me use the term good relationships, and I told y'all last night there is no such thing as a good relationship. The relationship that you experience right now may just simply be better than a relationship you had in the past. We're all in pursuit of the idea of good relationships. So I'm saying that intentionally because that means that there has to be an authority figure in this relationship that supersedes this person. And if I understand that first and foremost, now we're heading down the pathway of good, which means the relationship within itself, responsibility is to grow. So again, do the work on me first before I get into the space of relationship. And then we do the work on each other in the space of relationship so that we can grow. The only way that we can get there is if we first learn how to become vulnerable for the sake of what is potentially possible for us in this relationship. And I think too many times what we do is we try to control the narrative so that we will know the outcome. If you need to know the outcome, then you're going to struggle in the space of relationship because everything is hopeful moving forward. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring in your life. So that's the key. And so the very foundation, in my opinion, has to be a belief system that is hinged on the notion of faith. So now, stepping back to the work that I need to do on me, if I don't exercise faith in my life, I am going to struggle in the space of relationship. So, out of fear that I may go too far and say too much, I'm going to pause there and let you guys kind of respond to what either of us said, in either any shape, form, or fashion you feel needed to.
I wanted to, when I listened to your description of taking her by the hand and leading her. So there has to be some submission there, and there has to be finding you trustworthy there. And the same example that Queenie uses for far as corporate, leadership. And like you said, across the board, how you are in one relationship is going to be the way you are in all relationships. And so when you use that example, I can see, in my mind's eye that this person is willing to allow you to lead them because they've submitted to you and they trust you. And one of the posts that I put up this week was about Sarah. All right, ladies, don't get me. Just listen to me first before you respond.
They coming for you. It's coming. I seen that post, by the way.
but Sarah called her husband Lord, okay? Not her savior, but her Lord. And she respected him and she trusted his directions and for their life together. Not saying that is something that's common today, but just imagine being able to have that level of submission to someone and finding that person trustworthy. That's just an example that I use, but it's something, I think it's a part of the image of relationship that God wants us to have, because of course we have to submit to him. And no matter what we do in this life, we will submit to something. We will submit to a seatbelt because it's the law. We will submit to being on time for work because if you don't, there's consequences. And so I think that if we begin to look at submission in the way that it is, it's just us submitting to authority, but then that's trusted authority, a trustworthy authority. And so those are just some of the things that I thought about when I heard you mention leading her to Christ.
I love it. And let me kind of, so I want to make sure I kind of, and if I'm in error, let me know if I'm saying something that's outside of what you said, because I love the notion of how Sarah referred to Abraham as Lord, but he was not her savior. And I think too many times in the space of relationship, because of some of the things that we may have been through, we may want that other person to be the fill in the gap of those things. So some of the insecurities that I may possess, I need you to make me feel good about myself in this space. That's not that person's responsibility. That gap, that insecurity that exists, that is the space where you have to do the work on yourself. In the space of where you say she referred to her husband as Lord, it's again, it is the fact that his responsibility is to usher them in the direction of Christ. Like I say it jokingly, like, look, if I make a mistake, I just need to know that you're going to follow me all the way to the scene of the crash. If you with me, if we together, I'm good. You know what I'm saying? And here's the other part. I'm not supposed to be perfect. I am going to make mistakes. So are you. But in the space of our growth and development, what we do is we kind of give each other guided counsel, right? That's the thing. If we're not counseling each other in the direction of the character that we say that we're supposed to be portraying, right? I know I said this one day, but now I'm acting like this. Hey, hold up. This isn't exactly what we talked about. This isn't what you said you were going to do. Like you said that this is what you're going to do. So how does this lead to this, right? So we're supposed to give each other counsel within the space of relationship so that we can be the person that we're called to be. So I like the fact that you said that. Miss Queenie Love.
Oh, I just love it here. Now, Dwayne, you already know.
I know.
Let me get the mic right. Lisa, I love you, girl. Now you know. Listen, as soon as you said Sarah, you were like, "Yeah, now y'all don't keep." I giggled over here. I didn't know where you were gonna go with it, but let me just go ahead and say this now to your viewers. I'm not the scripture girl. I am not. Although I was married to a pastor and all the things, I still give a more worldly view, and here's why. Because there are a lot of people that are in the world that are struggling, even though they are closer and coming into the body of Christ. They are still in this world struggling. So, Lisa, to your point, you're right. She did refer to her husband and submitted and called him Lord. It's just like some women now call their men daddy. It's no different, right? Because it takes a lot, and I'm being real, it takes a lot. So whenever this trickles down to the world over here, Dwayne, then they're gonna know what we're talking about. It takes a lot for a woman, and you may not agree with that, but in relationships, some women call their man daddy, and some men call their woman mama. I know old heads that do it, young heads that do it for various reasons. Okay. So when they do that, it is very humbling. It is submissive. That's what it is. But it's also you do that because you feel safe. A lot of times I don't care if you started out calling them daddy and they were this, and then suddenly they do you wrong and mistreat you and take you through it. That fades right on away. Now you start calling them by their name, Tom, John, Lucas, or whomever. So whenever you do feel safe and you feel good and you feel kept and you got all the feels, you will submit. You will say those things. You will treat them differently. You will draw near to them. And I grew up when I grew up, I was told we should submit to each one to another. Like not just because this is the person, only them. We all deserve that. But I promise you, if there's no safety, someone's gonna pull back and not do it. If they don't feel safe, or if they don't feel like the person's even worthy of it. So I think we have to check in with ourselves. I love when you said that, Dwayne, that we start with zero first. Checking in with self before we even go one, two, three. We are at ground zero. Self, making sure that we're right, making sure truthfully that we feel okay, we feel safe. And not just that, are you even capable of submitting? Because there's certain things within you that may prevent you from being okay and willing to submit, willing to be vulnerable. So, and the last thing I'm going to say, my buddy over here, um personalities, I go there, personalities are different. Not every person has the ability to separate things as you put it. Not everyone has that ability. And I don't think everyone should, because we'll be walking around like robots. And oftentimes we seem like we are unaffected by events that happen in our lives. I can't compartmentalize. I don't have 9 boxes in my head to compartmentalize things. I don't. I'm a loving, kind, caring, sensitive human that and God created me to be this, and I feel all the things, and I have to work on putting things into perspective so that I'm not wounded all day every day by life, right? And when I'm in a relationship, that's even closer. This is where you're most vulnerable. The people that hurt you the most are the ones that's connected to you the closest. They hurt you the most. So we have to be aware of that. Not your partner might not be able to compartmentalize. Your partner may be super sensitive. Your partner may be needing you. You may be that Lord for them. Now you can put some boundaries up and you can teach and you can talk, but we got to understand that we're not all the same. And I'm not saying that you're saying that we are, Dwayne. I'm saying that for the person that needs to hear it, because sometimes you hear this and you think, well, where do I fit in that? I haven't figured that out. And you feel that you're the one that's broken. No, you are just who you are. And this doesn't work for every single person. That's why we're talking about it, so we can figure out what works for everybody. And maybe we'll say something that will work for you. All right, I'm off my soapbox.
I love it. I love it when you get on your soapbox, because we see eye to eye on some things. We just don't see eye to eye on everything. That's okay though. That is okay. That's where absolutely, that's where the dialogue must take place, because again we're talking about coming together, and I like the fact that you. I mean, it's a number of points that you made. I can't recall all of them, to be honest with you. But again, you're right. The Bible does tell us to submit one to another. But if we continue, it tells us how to do it. Right. So again, we don't get confused about what submission means to him or what submission means to her. And a lot of times, what I know, and I know this from experience because I used to hear this all the time, we're supposed to submit one to another, and she would stop reading at that. No, keep going, keep going. What does the rest of it say? I don't want to talk about that. It just says this right here. No, you can't isolate one line of scripture and then use that as a defense. And a lot of times we do that. I want to ask another question. And listen, I just want to say we're 30 minutes into the conversation. I only asked one question so far. One question that was templated, by the way. If I am waiting, because this is what I heard you say, and I want to make sure I'm clear as I say it. If I am waiting to see a thing in you before I submit to you, then am I not leading into this relationship through the lens of fear? That's point number one. And then number two, why do I think what is told to me conditional? Because it was told to me. Case in point, the Bible says, husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church. It doesn't mean wait until I see that you're submitting to me before I love you like Christ loved the church. That means that I need to learn what it means for husbands to love your wives like Christ loved the church. And as I recognize that you're the person I want to spend the rest of my life with, from day one, you get husbands love your wife like Christ loved the church. But you get it from the standpoint of my understanding. So I am growing in learning what that looks like progressively. So that's kind of like my question. Number one, if I am looking for a thing, if I am fearful of it, am I going into the relationship through the lens of fear? And number two, is the commandment given to me, is it conditional on what the other person do?
Okay, I'm going to try to answer this to the best of my ability. I didn't write anything down, so I'm just going by memory recall. Husband, love your wife as Christ loved the church. Now we can talk about which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? In this instruction, right? Because after husband, love your wife. Now I don't know if it's submit to your husbands and then husbands love your wife. I can't remember because I think it's the opposite. I think it's husband love your wife and wives be submissive, right? Now I don't know. I don't have it up in front of me, but I've been in church for it's like 100 years. But it's not about you having to wait. Now again, we're talking about people of our age. This is where I'm focused. I'm not talking about younger heads, right? They got to do things a little bit different because they haven't lived in a long life yet, right? Had enough experiences. Um, but what I'm saying is you the Bible teaches us a lot. It teaches us about being wise and it teaches us about guarding our heart. We can apply certain principles and then be like, yeah, but fall, just dive into this. I don't think we should just dive into a thing, right? I think we should think about what we're doing. And I believe that once we're in an environment and it proves itself or shows itself to be safe enough, you don't have to worry about submission because a lot of people, I mean, just speaking of women, and women are looking for a place to rest, like men are looking for a place to rest. So I don't think you have to, with the right person, right? I want to make sure with the right person, you don't have to fight this battle. If you got to fight this battle, that person just might not be for you. And again, I'm speaking of a certain age and beyond. But if you got to continue to keep trying to make somebody submit, it's just not that's just not that's probably not your person. And this is just me taking coming out of scripture, just talking, just talking to my friends at the bar. That may not be your person. So I'm not saying that you gotta, you gotta be fearful and scared and that's conditional. But things are conditional. I don't care what no one says. I get when we talk about scripture, but things are conditional. Things are conditioned. They show up to be conditional. Now, you as a person can choose not to be that way. But this world, it will show you that things are conditional. Oh, go back to the job. As long as you're doing what you need to do here, you have a place in this organization. As soon as you stop, I'm going to get rid of you. That's just the world that we live in. So we got to be wise in what we're doing. We're talking about, well, let's just submit. There's nothing wrong with submitting. Like we're all looking for that place to connect, that place to grow, that place to thrive. But when you get into something and you person shows you who they are and it's not a safe place, having conversations like Lisa has said over and over again, having those conversations, communicating, that's so important. But when you can't, when you're not going anywhere, do like I think Michelle said, let people leave as quick as they came. That way you're not sitting there held hostage to a hope that will not come to pass.
I like it. I like it. To your point,
Oh, thank you.
no, you're fine. To your point, I wanted to make sure I start exactly where you were saying, right?
Hmm.
Submit yourselves one to another. And here's the most important part to me in the fear of God.
Hmm.
So I have a responsibility before I start talking about the interpersonal relationship that we're going to go into,
Hmm.
right? Wives, submit yourself unto your own husband as unto the Lord, right?
Hmm.
So as unto the Lord, that's the key. For the husband is the head of the wife, and even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, the church is the subject unto Christ, so that the wives be unto their own husbands. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ has loved the church. And then when we go down to it, it actually tells how, which means that
Yeah.
men, this is a very large task that you were charged with. Now, I don't want to go into great detail about this because I can talk about this right here all day long. But I just wanted to bring that up because you mentioned that I didn't, know which one to go first. So just kind of go there. Lisa Keys, floor is yours, man. What do you have?
That's a lot, to conceptualize. But I got you. Um, to your question, and to what you just shared in Ephesians 5, as unto the Lord. Both individuals are responsible for their work. Like you say, Coach, my yard, my work. I don't know if I'm quoting you right.
My
So
boundary, my
my
yard, my work.
okay. So it's our responsibility before we enter into, and to me, when it says as unto the Lord, that indicates that I know where my identity is. I'm not confused about who I am or whose I am. And if I say that this is who I am, and then I'm striving to make sure that I am adhering to the principles that were given to me, being under Christ, then that means that I understand my identity. I need to connect with my identity. You know, the same person has the same identity as unto the Lord. Because if we don't, and when I say that, I want to be very clear. I'm not talking about superficial. I'm talking about identifying that this individual actions, his or her speech or behavior lines up with what we say as unto Christ. Because, and that takes time, because people can put on facades for a little while. So that's why entering into any type of covenant relationship is a process that we have to take our time to enter into. Because if we don't, we're gonna end up with that wolf in some sheep clothing. So we have to be mindful. And so we're responsible for our decisions. And if we miss or disregard the red flags that we see because we are desiring what we want more than anything else, then that's going to be, those are consequences for our decisions that we're making or we're choosing. And so we have to be able to identify who this individual is. I wrote down a note when Queenie said the right person. And that's up to each individual person. What you believe, what you look for. For me, I have to talk on the space of where I am and what I look for. So we had to be mindful. We just had to be mindful of entering into these relationships haphazardly. Because what happens when you enter into something haphazardly, you're going to get the consequences of entering into that relationship. You can be, you're driving down the street, not paying attention and running the red light, bam, it's an accident. So we have to be mindful, and it's our responsibility for our choices. And we can't blame somebody else if they do something that will offend us or hurt us, because we have entered into this willingly and we haven't taken the time to get to know who this person is. And I guess my big takeaway for this, and this is something that I learned, I have not always been here. I am learning. God is teaching me. I'm striving to get to know him better, understand his principles. And I believe that his way is the best way, because I've tried it my way. Didn't work out. So that's just for me. I'm not trying to influence anyone else, but I'm just saying that is how I have to look at things. And I'll land right there. I'm sorry.
I love it. I love that response. And I think that's kind of like where we get stuck, right? And I think, Queenie, you mentioned this previously. You have some of us who are just coming into Christ and still trying to figure the rest of it out. And I think, to Lisa's point, I think that's where everybody is at some degree of the journey, right? Especially in the beginning, we like to call them babes. I really hate that term, though. But we like to call them babes because they probably just accepted Christ, a few weeks ago, a few months ago, whatever that looked like, and they're still trying to figure it out. And I think a large portion of what we call figuring it out is trying to figure out what I need to dump off of this journey that I acquired from the world, as I learn what I need to put in this boat that I now have to journey in. So there's a lot of things that we were taught early on. There's a lot of things that we've learned in when it comes down to negotiating the space of relationship. And I think a large portion of that is that, okay, do I want to keep this? Or do I want to throw it away? And so it becomes a matter of like versus dislike, as opposed to understanding. And understanding for me is always the key. Well, what I mean when I say that? Well, going back and looking at this idea of submission, sure. Before I even met you, I should have already submitted myself unto the Lord without question, right? Now, I am negotiating this space of relationship with him. He don't have to dump anything. I'm the one that needs to dump. What am I dumping? I'm dumping all of my insecurities. I'm dumping all of my confused states of existence and all that other great stuff so that he can teach me how to be in relationship with him. So when I find someone who is actually doing the same thing, only thing that's happening is that they're just restructuring something now. So now something is being restructured. What does that look like? Okay, well, everything is unto him still. It didn't change, right? Submission does not necessarily change. Who we share the space of submission with now has been adjusted. So I like, as I'm listening to the different perspectives, how they really sound a lot alike, right? And so what I'm hearing as I'm, trying to make sense of both of them together is that it all depends upon where I'm at in the space of this journey, right? Because on one aspect of the journey, I can put a lot more on you, probably more than you're supposed to have. And if you accept it, woe unto you. Or I could recognize and hold the space and allow you to work through it as long as there's some progression happening, as long as there's some progression happening. Let me say it again. As long as there's some progression happening, but don't hold me hostage to you telling me, "Oh, I need to do it when I'm comfortable." No, that means you need to go find a space where you're comfortable, because even in the space of our existence, complacency should never be an option. And when we choose complacency, that becomes a problem and we create problems as well. So even in relationships, relationships are supposed to grow. It should be a place of continual growth where we are empowering and challenging one another, not threatening and all that other great stuff. So this was just the introduction. Okay, so we so listen, let's move on. Let's move on to the next section because I think this is where it's really going to get good. Submission and communication, opening the floodgates of honesty. Okay, how can couples create a communication environment where submission is expressed as a form of honesty and openness rather than obligation or suppression?
Dwayne, why do you give these fully loaded questions?
Because that's where we live. That's
Goodness.
that's where we live.
It's a good question. And I'm here to hopefully get an answer from Lisa. No,
Queen, I do not have all the answers, okay? I'm trying to tell you.
no, how can couples create a communication environment where submission is expressed as a form of honesty and openness? Submission is expressed as a form of honesty and openness. I think you got me with the obligation of suppression. Like what? Um, uh, God, do we feel that? Yeah, that's how his brain works. You're right, Nick D. I get it. Believe me, I know. I've known him for a while. Which is great. He has a beautiful mind. So let's see. He challenges me here because I try my best to stay where you all are at, and I'm all over here talking to my worldly people. But let's see. So honesty, and I love us. I love all of us, right? But seriously, so honesty and openness. I mean, God, I think like the obligation and suppression is what's got me because I've never felt that communication was obligatory. Maybe I did feel that I need to suppress my ability to communicate. Anyway, let me just get out of that because that's where I am. I'm just like, man, I've never even thought of it that way. However, I believe that probably someone on the other side might have felt that, it's an obligation, right? But honesty and openness, I think for me personally, with a couple's look, if you're both walking in the same direction, and I have to say that because I do know that oftentimes we couple with people that we're not equally yoked with, and maybe we change somewhere along the way, and we rise and they stay the same or whatever. So sometimes you wind up in these imbalanced relationship, and you still love them, and you're still committed to them, and you're still loyal. So it becomes very, very challenging. But I'm going to say this: if you're both walking in the same direction, or you both desire to walk in the same direction, then what more of a beautiful space can you create than having a place for honesty and openness? It's when you're constantly keeping secrets and you're lying and you're deceiving and you're cunning and you're playing all these games that are toxic that you're going to have problems. You're going to feel that suppression and that obligation. But I think if your heart and your mind is in the right place when you're looking at your partner, I mean, you talk about that. Like you really do need to offer space for this person to share who they are so you can learn who they are. If you're still, again, I don't know how long you may have been together, but what relationship what relationship can actually work without some sort of openness and honesty? I mean, truly healthy relationship. So I think that we should have that conversation and push and work towards that. I'm big on going to get counseling. I'm big on having accountability couple partners, like other couples that are in the same boat trying to make it. Not that when you're with the girl or you're with the guy that you're out here doing conniving and underhanded stuff. I'm talking about people's character that is not in question. I mean, you create these spaces if that's what you want. And if you don't want it, then you will go against it. You'll do the total opposite. But I think you really got to, again, know who you are. But this is a big one, Dwayne. I'm like, what? Yeah, I just think that starting with knowing where you both are trying to go. And I love the fact that Dwayne mentioned the word complacency. And if there's no growth and someone's being complacent in that relationship, then that's a clear indicator that they're just not trying to go in the same direction. You have to make a decision then. But if you are open to this, then head into the direction. You lead with honesty, lead with openness. Both of you do that. Both of you. It's not one or the other. Both of you do that and be accountable to that. I know we got into a fiery pit about accountability before, but be accountable to that, to each other for that. I didn't say you, so don't you do that. I just said we got in a fiery pit. That's all I said. I ain't say who with me in that pit.
My feelings was almost hurt.
Don't do that. Don't do
I'm
that,
joking.
baby.
I'm
Don't do
joking.
that. Lisa, bring us home, girl, because this was a big one for me.
I don't want to simplify it. Yet I think that when I look at the question, how can couples create a communication environment? And you mentioned, Queenie, about creating that environment and where it's a safe environment. And I think that when we come into relationship, we're in relationship. As you said earlier, Coach, we're growing. So there's going to have to be there's going to be some ebbs and flows because we're trying to get to know each other, and we have to create that place. Like I want to liken it to creating our own kingdom for our family, or creating our own, safe place for us to abide in, where it's just us. And I'm including the relationship, which is God, as unto the Lord. So where it's just us, and we're using the principles that is given to guide us in this environment of relationship, then it's up to us. We have to do some work in this. That's some work that's required for us to do. And we come together in my field, the real estate field, they call it the meeting of the minds. So you have two persons, the buyer and the seller, coming together, and there's a mediator. And we're coming together so that both individuals' needs can be met. And in this case, I just use that as an example because the mediator, which is Christ Jesus, and the one that we say that we're in relationship with, he's the one that's going to help us in these environments. Because if we're adhering to the principles that he has put in place for us, then coming together, whether we want to accept it or not, because sometimes we're stubborn and we don't want to adhere to. I remember going through, I'm going to veer off a little bit. I remember trying to learn about submission and my emotions. And I was like, well, I know that in his Bible somewhere, God says that he cared about my emotions. I know. I searched it for the longest time. I'm serious. I searched it and I was like, okay, so I know that he, so I was going through this process, and it was so uncomfortable for me because I needed to understand why I believed something that was not in this document that I said I believed in, and something that I have expressed for most of my life. And I'm not going to tell you, but for most of my life. So I had to understand what his principles and his will that was best for me. And I started off my professional development being under Coach Dwyer's consulting firm, right? And I was kicking and fighting like this because I was not going to just receive this. But as I began to read and as the Holy Spirit began to teach me, and I began to realize that my emotions didn't help me. Sometimes they limited me being able to hear. And I remember God saying plainly to me, I was just crying and I was just boo-hooing. And he said, you can't hear me. And so it became like, okay, so I'm supposed to have no emotions. I was going through asking all these questions because I'm like, so what is this all about? Why you don't care about how I feel? But he is telling me he does care, but it's just not the way that I've been taught. And so I had to go back and unlearn some stuff as I seen in the chat, and then relearn. And it was a process. But let me tell you, it was so beneficial because now I didn't respond with my emotions because now I had an understanding. I'm not saying I'm totally delivered for responding that way, but I did. I would cry at a drop of a dime. I would, that's how I responded to things because I did not understand. And then I learned later that my tears could be perceived as a form of manipulation. So those are all those things I had to work through for me, um, and me and when I would have my coaching sessions, it would be the most difficult thing. I would be on fire because I would go to the document I said I believed, and I would search it, and I could not find what I wanted it to say. And so I had to adjust my behavior to what the God was saying. And that was for me. I know everyone does not believe the way that I believe. So I understand that. But I was just saying that was for me. That was my journey.
I don't know if I should thank you or run right now. No, I'm joking. So thank you for being vulnerable and transparent about your journey. And I remember those conversations as though it was like yesterday, to be honest with you. I introduced, if you were with us last night, I introduced the panel to the Dunning-Kruger effect. And what we don't realize is that a lot of us are in the space of Dunning-Kruger and don't even realize it. We think we are better. We think we are better at a thing than what we really are until we have a mirror placed in our face and a person holds you accountable, say, take a look. Don't deviate to the left. Don't deviate to the right. Don't give me an excuse. Don't say this is the reason. No. Just look and be quiet and just look for a second. And if you do that long enough, then you will get to the true nature of what the International Love Chapter is about, right? 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It ain't about love is this and love is that. No. The first few verses of that chapter is all about arrogance. Read it closely. But the entirety of it is all about humility. And so for me, I really do believe that a communication environment that invites both people to the table and they can be honest and open requires us first to be humble. For starters, out the gate, before we go any further, we have to humble ourselves and realize that I'm not the most important person at this table. and your emotions will only show up to protect you. Your emotions, even though you say you care about me, and I really do believe you do, but your emotions don't care about us. Your emotions care about you, and your emotions will fight to protect you at all costs. So it's not that your emotions are not welcome, it's that your emotions must put in the proper line of authority. The emotion is not the authoritative figure in the relationship of you. That's for starters. And so, because you never got to the point of properly aligning your emotions, what ends up happening is that your emotions lead when it becomes to you. And that's always, in most cases, not always, right? In most cases, that's going to lead you down the path of making the wrong decision, being in the wrong situations, being with the wrong person, doing the wrong thing. And so, when you put things in its proper order, right? And then when the emotions kick in, only after when being placed in the proper order, then the right decision is made, and then the right power can come behind the decision to generate or create the thing that you're looking for in the end. But it's so difficult to get to that point, especially when everything in the world says embrace your emotions, throw them out there and let the world adjust to them. Because at the end of the day, that's what it wants you to do. Because as long as you continue to do that, you're just going to keep recycling confusion after confusion after confusion. Look at the statistics. Divorce is at an all-time high. I'm a victim of it. Not a victim of divorce. I'm a victim of the stuff that I knew prior to getting a divorce. I was an active participant in my relationship, and I said, but I was like Kevin Hart said, I say it with my chest. But here's the funny part about it: everybody who's ever been a divorce, you were an active participant. I don't really care how bad the other person was. It could be 99% their fault. That 1% is still mine. And until I own that 1%, it doesn't matter who I go around. It's always going to be them. This person. It's the man holding me down. Stop it. The man is a person you see every time you look in the mirror. So that's why I love this conversation, because at the end of the day, when it comes down to communication, I do have a responsibility when it comes down to communication. I have a responsibility to first listen. If we listen more than we talk, right, then we become better communicators. In fact, I'm gonna give somebody a nugget real quick. If you really want to be a public speaker, listen to very good public speakers. Stop trying to talk all the time. Spend more time listening, right? In the space of communication where you want honesty and openness, listen first and be honest and open about what you process, not about what you felt them saying. Because here's the thing: you have to process what they're saying first, then seek to understand what they're saying, which means before you dip it in the ocean of emotions, what you need to do is you need to say, okay, this is what I understand you to say. If I get this correct, I believe what you're saying is one, two, three, four, and five. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is three, four, five, six, and seven. Okay. Well, why did I hear one, two, three, four, and five? Because in most cases, you're probably projecting what you're already thinking on that person coming from the lens of assumption. And if you were with us a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the law of assumption. So again, we have to really understand the value that exists in the environment of communication, because that's a lot of spaces where we're failing at the art of communication, because communication for couples, that's your superpower. Listen, I'm gonna tell you the truth. If and I'm a man, just in case you didn't know. If a man is having a bad day at work, I come home, and if I was married, if my wife says the right words to me walking through the door, I immediately calm down. But it's like the first thing you do is like, how was your day at work? Which is not a bad question, right? And you share it, and then he goes into the details about it, so forth and so on. Well, now what he is doing is he is reliving that experience. And so what we think is by having them to relive that experience that it's going to work out fine. But instead of reliving the experience, what do you say? No, it wasn't such a good day. Well, I tell you what, if you want to talk about it, we can. However, let's do this, right? So now you have a way of changing the environment, but you have to first listen. A lot of times we go on autopilot. 85% of your day-to-day activities is based upon your subconscious memory, which means that you're accustomed to doing the exact same thing over and over again. And we get caught up into habitual communication, which simply makes us believe that we're communicating. You're not, because you've turned your ears off. You're just hitting your triggers. Yep, I checked that mark. Yep, I checked that mark. Yep, that check. That's not an environment for open, honest communication. Because when I do open up to you, if I ever feel that you're on autopilot, shut down. And I don't mean shut down from ever communicating again. I'm going to shut down in this conversation because at the end of the day, I need you to listen to what I'm saying. And I'm not saying that this is a male or female issue. This is a people issue. Both men and women do that. Get out of autopilot, right? Get out of autopilot and actively engage your ears and your brain at the same time. Listen to what they're saying, process it mentally. Don't dip it in the ocean of your emotions, right? Process it mentally, respond to them, and then you two learn how to have dialogue. Once you learn how to have dialogue, then you can take intermittent breaks to talk about, well, when this happens, this is what I'm thinking, this is how I'm feeling, and I'm not making it your responsibility. It's something that I probably need to work on. Can I ask you to help me do that better? So now what we're doing is we're partnering together so that we can grow moving forward. So that's just kind of like my long-winded response to two great responses, and I greatly appreciate that. Yes,
If
go
you
ahead.
don't, if you don't mind, Coach, I wanted to add. Now, I wanted to add this because there was like about a 2 or 3 month pro- process during my personal development that I just was not trusting what Coach was saying to me. We were having a because I was like everything that I learned. I was going through this emotion where everything that I learned that I can't that I have to unlearn it now. And then I had to separate myself for a little bit and learn and try to figure this thing out because it was it was difficult process to to go through, and I had to take my time and learn it for myself because if I didn't, I was going to continue to stay in the same process. I just wanted to add that it wasn't something that happened overnight. It was about a year-long process where I began to continue to search and to be prayerful, and God continued to show me, and the Holy Spirit began to continue to teach me, so that I would be able to learn what He was saying and not take it and not be offended, because I would think that coaches has a preference to his male gender because that's just how I felt about it, because it seemed like I was required to do all these things, but then the male wasn't, because that's the way I was viewing it. But then when God began to teach me that He is the center and the person in the relationship that we have to make sure that we keep our focus on, that was the thing that helped me to understand it much better.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And I was talking to you. I wasn't talking to a male. Queenie, your thoughts, man, before we move forward.
How do you know me about emotions in my line of work? I mean, I work in a space where therapy, counselors, therapists, psychologists, and all that are around, and abundance, social work, and so on and so forth. So, um, processing your emotions, I 100% agree with it. I still believe that we are all made up of all the things. And whenever we use scripture, Jesus even wept. So that was an emotion there. And there are other emotions that were shown throughout the Bible. So I do get it. I just think that we are all we are all made up differently, and not just we, but the people that we engage with, our partners, we're all different. And so I am definitely not one to tell a person where to place their emotions, how to manage them. If it's unhealthy and you're about to, hop off of a roof, I go into crisis mode, and so I do, I work in that space. But I'm, I just believe that in relationships, all these things are part of it. How we manage it, is one thing. Having to open communication, learning your partner, learning yourself, knowing who you are, all that's super important. But yeah, I just believe that yeah, I was listening to Lisa how she was speaking about at a point in her life she was super emotional. I think there was a message in the chat box where some people cry. Look, I'm a crier. I'm all the things, right? I'm passionate. I'm all that. Um, but I also listen and I try to learn what my partner needs, or even my daughter. I like to use my daughter as an example. She's an introvert and she gets exhausted by me. I'm an extrovert and I'm all over the place. And I jump up in the morning, I'm like, hello, good morning, and blah, blah, blah. And she is just like, ugh. And I used to be so sensitive to that because I'm like, I'm showing you all this love and I don't understand. I don't understand. And it wasn't until she was probably 19 did I even hear her when she said, "That's just not who I am, mom. That's who you are." And I'm like, "Oh, that is right. But this is the way I show love." And I thought, and I want you to know I'm engaged and I want you to know I'm here and I'm mom and I'm it was too much for her. So now I've learned, as we said, listen to what she said to me. And now I govern myself accordingly. It doesn't change who I am. I still get up and I give the hello, good mornings to the people that are able to receive them. And to her, I turn it down a notch and I'll be like, hey, girl. And I move right on. And I'm okay with the level of energy that she gives back to me because I truly understand her. But as disrespectful as that emotion that she showed me used to be, I used to perceive it as disrespect. Like I grew up saying, if you don't speak back, that's disrespectful, things like that. Now I've changed how I look at this. Now I'm like, nope, that is who she is. And I love her just as she is now that I have a better understanding. So in relationships for me, I'm just trying to I let people be who they are. That's your space. Now what I do with that is on me. But this is who you are. This is how you show up. It works for me or it doesn't work for me. I work for you or I don't work for you. Either way, I just respect where we are and all things have a place. Everything has its place. It just may not be with me.
I love that.
That's all I have.
I love that. And it's here's why I love what you said so much, because you said the exact same thing that was said. You just said it differently, right? And to somebody else, when they heard it, they're like, no, they're thinking that it's an opposing point of view. It is not opposing point of view. You had to listen closely. That's why I love listening to these different perspectives, because the different perspective gives us different means of navigating the same journey, right? To your point about your daughter, I love the fact that you brought that up because that's your daughter, right? I'm not trying to spend the rest of my life with my child. I love my children, right? But I ain't trying to wake up to them in the morning. You see what I'm saying? So their personal reality is their personality, right? Personal reality. Their personal reality, again, only gives them a perspective of the world. So it's for us to expand and grow and all of that great stuff. So thank you for sharing that. And I greatly appreciate that. Listen, I want to make sure I see you guys in the chat. You guys are adding value. But as you can hear that they're just going to town up here, and I greatly appreciate what they're saying. So it's not that I'm ignoring you. It's just that, we're just vibing with the conversation. Michelle Ray, thank you for the donation again. We greatly appreciate that. All donations are given back to you in the form of the value that we actually provide to you. That said, let's move on. Not the next question. I'm going to go.
I have a question. I'm sorry. I don't
Yes.
want to. I just have a question. Like I read the comments and I hear you, but this is what I want to know. To you, Dwayne, understanding these principles and relearning things, right? Putting things into a different perspective, figuring out, how we should navigate. Have so now we've learned these new principles. Many of us have. Has any of these new principles in application brought us closer in the relationship with the people that we want to be in relationship with?
So, because I believe you're asking me that question. So that being said,
All of us, but
all
yes.
of us. Okay. So I can't speak for everybody else, for starters, but from my understanding, based upon conversations and so forth and so on, the answer is yes. And how is it being that way? Because what I'm seeing, what I'm discovering, is that people get to strip the facade earlier. It makes them be honest with themselves so that they can be honest with somebody else, which is the layer that exists between the space of quote unquote get to know you, right? And so people tend to hold a facade, right? They hold a facade in space for as long as they possibly can so that they can get what they want. And then once they get what they want, they still hold a facade there until it becomes exhausting. And now you're just gonna get the shotgun blast of who I am. But we already tied the knot. You didn't put a ring on it. You see what I'm saying? So what I've learned, stop it, Lisa. So what I've learned, so what I've learned is it makes you intentional on taking the facade and putting it to the side. It's very difficult to live a pure, authentic life because you've practiced facade your entire life, right? So this is who I am, but it makes you intentional about stripping it down and say, okay, listen, this is really who I am. I am not a perfect person. I don't speak perfectly. I'm from the South. I'm about 5'8". I'm dark skinned. I got a gap in my mind. Like all you'll be completely honest. You know what? This is me. So now you're getting the truth up front. It's nothing left for you to discover. You see what I'm saying? And if we do that, if we can be bold enough, and that's the key, if we can be bold enough to do that and get outside of all of the craziness that the world teaches, because you've been around you've been around a little bit. You got to be 6'4", 6-pack. You know what I'm saying? All that other it's ridiculousness. So when a person gets to the point of realizing that this is not really who I am, this is just my earth suit. Who I am is in here, and this person is screaming and yearning to come out. But this person says, no. It's like the hope. You know what I'm saying? Go away, come on out. No. Right. So that's what it is. And in learning from these principles, right? It's not perfecting the principles. That's where the other side of it. That's the extreme version. It's not perfecting the principles. It's learning incrementally, step by step, that I have the opportunity to be a better person today than I ever was yesterday. Because eventually I'm going to intersect this thing called life with some people who deserve to meet the best version of myself, not that person I was 15, 20 years ago. And that's kind of like the point. So I love that question, and I hope I answered it. Yeah, that's just it. I hope I answered it.
Yeah, thank you. No, you
Okay.
did, and that's the reason why, because we learn all these things, and when I used to teach couples classes up the road there in the DC area, um, one of the things I did not allow was for well, I tried not to allow, let me say that I discouraged it, for a wife to come and get all the tools and go back and beat her husband with the information, or for a husband to come and gather all the tools and then go back and beat the wife. I encourage couples to come and learn of this at the same time so that they could work together and figure out what worked for them and what did not together.
Yeah.
Sometimes we arm ourselves and then we go into battle with the little bit of armor we have, and then there's something else that we're facing that's way bigger, and
Hmm.
there's no way we can defeat this, or we just can't. And so I just wonder, like, are people able to come together, apply this as a couple, and then
Hmm.
have we seen results where they've been able to apply it as a couple in this work? Because you're faced with so much other stuff, and
Right.
you just are. So
Yeah.
thank you for the answer.
No, you're very welcome. And I one last point before we move on to the next question. One of the first most difficult things to learn is that everybody's not your enemy. In fact, no person out there is actually your enemy, period. That's the very difficult thing for somebody to learn, especially when they've been through a bad experience, because they want to look at everybody through the lens of their pain. No, because what you have now done, you've placed horns on everybody who tells you hello. What's your angle? What you looking for? No, stop it. That's not that's not reality. That's not life, right? So again, I must do the work necessary to realize that even if a person does a thing that's bad, right? They could have been intentional about doing the thing. They could have been malicious in the act that they're doing. But here's the reality of the truth. Do you think you've ever done anything malicious ever in your life? If that's possible, then look at you, because the same level of grace that you're about to give yourself in the next question I'm about to ask you that you don't know yet is the same level of grace you need to give that person for their behavior at that particular point in time. And the answer to the next question that I have not asked you yet is always ignorance. You don't know what you don't know. And a lot of us go into a relationship space thinking I'm gonna get them before they get me, especially when it starts looking like I can't control the motion in the ocean. That's why I say it's like we try to do a thing that stems from a spiritual realm, but we want to do it in an earthly form. And so we continuously fail at it. So again, long-winded. I'm sorry, let me get the next question. Okay. The next point, personal boundary and healthy submissions. So the question that I have for you is, in the process of negotiating boundaries within a relationship, how can partners ensure that submission remains a mutual, respectful practice rather than a one sided expectation?
Okay, see.
Queen, tell us
um,
that listen out.
I think we have part of this. Again, is going to have to be mutual consent. You know, both people are going to have to um, have a conversation, establish um, the bounds of their relationship, and then sometimes you may have to come back and revisit them as you grow because you're growing together. Sometimes you may have to come back to revisit what you put in place initially. Um, but and I think that's the part of, because we're growing when we come together, we're constantly growing. We're constantly growing together. So the way we thought, or the awareness that we had when we initially entered into a relationship and set these guidelines for our relationship, may have to be some readjustments to them. And I think that that will help with the one-sided expectations. You know, in part, I think that will help with the one-sided expectations. So we have to respect each other and those boundaries that we initially set. And I think that should be the easy part of it. But to even say that we have to respect each other in that relationship, I think it shouldn't have to be said. But I think we have to say it because sometimes um, our in the relationship, the individuals, some of that old residue may show up. And so when that shows up, we have to stop and we have to address it so that we can stay in our environment, and that it will would remain peaceful. So I think those are some of the aspects to this question that would be helpful.
Don't you have a comment, sir? I mean, I know we're short on time. I'm trying to give you space.
Oh my goodness. Queenie looked like the kid in class that got asked a question. You know, the teacher asked the class a question and she don't want nobody to call her, so they start looking around.
That question is
Okay.
it's a lot to unpack.
It's a lot to unpack, but I'll take a stab at it because, again, I know we're short on time, but here we go. My thoughts. Distinguish is the word that jumped out to me, right? For me, when I look at this question, I'm like, well, first of all, how do we define any of this as a couple? I think we got to understand how each person defines these things, because I can have an ideal in my head to say, oh, it could be this way, but if we don't define it very, similar, if not the same, then the expectations are going to be different anyway. So I think, going back to communication, we all know that one of the biggest things that we need to build a strong foundation in relationship is communication, open, honest communication, because we can communicate and it could be damning, or we can communicate and it could be uplifting. So let's go there. We're all healthy, right? So open, honest, healthy communication. So we figure that out. But now, how do we define these things? And I think that oftentimes in relationships, we define and interpret things differently. So being able to have the conversations and be honest about the conversations, because sometimes people will sit in front of you and mirror you and tell you what you want to hear and what they believe you believe, and not really what they believe. They'll go back and get in their truck or car and not even give it a second thought because it never really resonated with them anyway. They're only mirroring you. So let's understand that those individuals are out here as well. You may be the individual, but they're out here. So now, just assuming that you both had the same definition, then I think now you have to just figure out what typically disrupts submission. What interferes with submission? What would cause me to pull back from this? I'm fully submitted. Like I said earlier when I first talked, in a relationship, in the beginning, oftentimes we lean in, but when things begin to happen, we begin to sit back up. So what is now causing me to sit up when we're talking about boundaries? Are we in agreement on boundaries? I go back to what I said earlier. How can we walk together if we don't agree? So, do we agree on what a boundary is and what does it look like? Personal boundaries. Baby, I need my Saturdays to myself. Does that look like, oh, she needs her Saturdays to herself because she's wanting to be in the street because my last girlfriend was, and now I'm triggered by that? Or does that mean, oh, I respect that that's who she is? Saturdays is when she does her content, blah, blah, blah. I respect that, babe. Let me know whenever you got time. We'll hook up. No problem. This communication must happen early on in the courting stage. Y'all do know it. My this age, y'all know what courting is. So in the courting stage, right? You got this is where you kind of discover these things. You talk and you and for the young heads, listen, they got all kind of games out here, cards that you can just have these conversations to dig deep to know the person and learn who they are. So that when you have these type of conversations about compromising, you know, some or personal boundaries or compromising their well-being, you can get a picture of a person by having these conversations in a less threatening environment, so that by the time you get into it, to me personally, well, now you just are expecting what they told you that they are, or expecting them to be who they told you that they are, and if they're not, have a different conversation. What does that look like now that you've discovered they're not who they said they were? But at its face, define it. Define what it looks like. What's going to interrupt or interfere with me being vulnerable with you? Me moving in humility with you. Once you show me that that you're capable of hurting me intentionally, maybe I need to sit up. That's all I have.
That was good. That was really good. I like that. I like both perspectives actually. Um, I think in a condensed version, as I'm looking at this question, this assumes that some things took place already. The get to know you phase has already gone past. Boundaries have already been established. Um, because I would be the person to tell you that if a person does not respect your boundaries, then that person is not the person for you. That's just my own personal take on it. So these things have already been established. The conversation have already had. You've got to know one another. You understand what submission looks like. You understand what respect looks like. You have boundaries established, and both people are respecting each other's boundaries, and you're doing the work on self. So I'm assuming that that's where we are. Understand what I just said, because if you understand everything I just said, what I'm about to say moving forward is not for everybody. I'm gonna say that part again. If you understood what I just said, what I say moving forward is not for everybody. If you have not done all of that work on yourself in your relationship or whatever situationship, whatever you choose to call it this day, to where you're not at the space to where you have these things in place, then this right here may not necessarily be for you. But do please still listen. Um, because I'm not compromising with anything or anyone. Because in my opinion, there's no such thing as a compromise. I think at the end of thing, what we're really doing is we're moving boundaries for the sake of the situation. That's what a compromise is. So why are we talking compromise if we have boundaries? And I'm not just singling that one thing out. I'm singling some of the things that you will hear in the space of this mutual respect and practice, rather than the one-sided expectation. So a lot of times we use compromise, and I hear it so many times. You gotta learn to compromise in relationship. You gotta learn to compromise in relationship. Like, wait, what? I don't get that. What does that really mean? And then when I hear them say it, it's like it still doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. So we come up with a very nonsensical approach to a very common concern. So if we're practicing mutual respect, then we're becoming better at mutual respect throughout the course of time. And therefore, we never get to the point of a one-sided expectation. Well, what is one-sided expectation? Okay, I'll say it since everybody don't want to reference the prophet Janet Jackson. It's control. That's the thing that it's the thing. It is always the issue that shows up in every relationship. It is control. Now, we got to be completely transparent and honest with ourselves. Is it really control? Or like Queen has said, is it because I felt like my past relationship was controlling? Therefore, now I go into a relationship with my control blinded, not my blinders, but my control hypersensitivity goggles on, right? Because if you stand up for yourself, oh, that's controlling, right? And so that's why I say we got to be careful of these new age, terms that come forth that pits people against people. right? I guarantee you, when I was in, Queen, I am 50. Just want to put that out there. Um, when I was 20 years old, I couldn't tell you what narcissism was, gaslighting. I couldn't tell you what scapegoating was. I couldn't tell you what none of those things were at the age of 20. Now, I wasn't looking for it either. I wasn't studying it. But at the end of the day, it was just like, you don't get it. But here's what I could have gotten. I'm not saying that I didn't, but here's what I could have gotten by the age of 20. I could have got a good upbringing. I could have learned what respect was. I could have learned how to communicate with people. I could have learned how to negotiate a space, shared space with someone else to such a degree that we exist in harmony and we don't necessarily try to take advantage of one another. That's what I could have learned. So that existed then, minus all of these brand new terms that we use that we like to use against people, which in turn is the only fear that exists in the space of relationship. You fear someone using you, controlling you, taking advantage of you. These are not relationships mentality. These are not a connecting mentality. These are a separating mentality. All of these things, if they're at the forefront of your mind and you're thinking about them things, so forth and so on, you automatically have up a shield against relationship. So that's the thing I'm going to say. Again, remember what we're talking. We're talking about have already done the work, get to know you, right? Establish boundaries, mutual respect, all of this stuff up to this point. This is where that conversation happens, not there. If we're trying to have this conversation here, way back here, then we're missing the point. This is where we talk and we go back to the boundaries and say, have our relationship matured to the point that boundaries now need to be mutually adjusted? Because I don't think boundaries remain the same throughout the entirety of the relationship. The more we grow, the more the relationship grows, the more the boundaries grow, right? We now expand our territory. What does that mean? That means that, well, in expanding our territory, I give you more access. You give me more access. Why? Because we have existed in the space. We've grown together. We've shown that we really have each other's best interests in heart. That to me is what it looks like when there is no scare, no fear, no misinterpretation of one-sided expectation. Even if, let's just say, she goes out there and makes this ridiculously large purchase. Well, she makes this ridiculously large purchase, and I'm talking about that because that's what most men are scared of, right? she makes this ridiculously large purchase, but she actually made it for you. Silly. You know what I'm saying? So why would she make that ridiculously large? Because you said you wanted it. But when she purchased it, oh, you saw, oh, well, you didn't think about this bill, you didn't think about this. But did you guys have did you guys have a boundary that stated that, hey, in the space of joint spending, anything in excess of this amount of money, we'll come to the table and talk about it first. Well, if I did that, I couldn't have surprised you. Hey, sorry, it is what it is. This is what the boundary states. So that's kind of like the way you got to look at this. Mutual respectful practice is available for everybody. But the first thing that we need to understand is we have to posture ourselves so that we can recognize it when it's available. And a lot of times we're not ready for it. We'll say we are, but then when it's presented to you, I'm like, that doesn't sound good. Anything that sounds too good to be true is true. What? What? Come on, let's be for real. Okay, we've been a little long-winded today. I greatly appreciate you guys for staying with us and all of the value that you added in the chat. I greatly appreciate these two because they are amazing and awesome, as you guys have already heard. I know Queen is itching to go get her Saturday started, so let's go ahead and dive into our final thoughts. And Queen, I'm gonna let you go first, right? So let's get into the final thoughts first, and then we can actually move on out of here.
My final thoughts is really simple. We are all striving to get there. We're all desiring better connection, developing better relationships, not just on our side, but from the recipient, from the, receive on the receiving side as well. Um, and it's work. None of us are there. I don't care, how much work you've done, you still have a little bit more to do, right? And all we can do is govern ourselves accordingly. And the more we learn, the better we can show up. So don't be hard on yourself. Give yourself grace, the same grace you would extend to others. Give it to yourself first. And know that you deserve exactly what it is that's in your mind, the work that you're doing, whatever life you're building for yourself, you deserve to have that. So work towards that. And follow me, check me out. I'm Queenie Love, and I love loving on people, and I believe that all of our opinions and all of our thoughts, they have a place. So continue to grow and be yourself.
I have truly enjoyed I've truly enjoyed this conversation, and hearing from Queenie and listening to Coach the mindset coach, Coach Dwyer. It has been it's been good. I think that I would like to leave um, this thing. Um, we're all made in God's image, and therefore none of us are better than the other. And it's so much more beneficial for us to work together and not work against each other, and to continue to shed off the things that we were taught incorrectly um, in the past, that was taught to us, and to continue to learn um, what's beneficial for us. So when we learn, when we're healthy, then we can enter into all of our environments, whether family, whether it's relationship, whether it's coworkers. When we're healthy, we can build beautiful relationships, in our life. And so that's one thing that I want to always be mindful of. All of us are made in His image, in His likeness, and we are wonderfully made. And we just have to, for me as a believer, I would say we have to make sure that we're mindful that we can't, if we say we're going to be in this relationship, the creator of marriage, or in a relationship, that we have to be in it. And sometimes that may mean that we have to adjust the way that we think about things. And so I will leave you with, continue to do the work on yourself. It's a lifelong journey. It never stops, as Queenie was saying. We have to continue to strive to be more like Christ. And I will land there.
I ain't got no last words. Look here, bring me to the stage. We about to close this thing out. I've been doing last words all day. Listen, we greatly appreciate you guys. You guys are awesome. Your value, you well loved here on this platform. And again, every one of you are always welcome back. So on behalf of the panel, listen, you guys have a great day, an amazing rest of your weekend, and let the best version of yourself be a blessing to somebody else.